In this video, we are going to be talking about the surface area of cylinders. So our essential question is, how do you find the surface area of cylinders? Cylinders are a little bit different object because they contain circles. So we really have to look at deconstructing a cylinder to see what it's made of, just like we did surface areas of other three-dimensional shapes. So a cylinder, as you can see, is made up of two identical circles, which are the bases, and actually a rectangle. So the rectangle actually wraps around the circles and forms the tube part of our cylinder. So really, we're looking at the area of two circles and a rectangle. So the surface area of a cylinder is essentially two circles and a rectangle. So we already know how to find the area of a circle. So finding the area of the two identical circles shouldn't be a problem. The area of the circles is pi r squared, and since there's two of them, we're going to take 2 times pi r squared. So we're going to need to know the radius of our cylinder. And also, to find the area of the rectangle is base times height. Now, the base of this rectangle is the same as the circumference of the circle because it has to wrap around the circle completely. So if you'll watch the animation, you can see how this red rectangle wraps around the circle perfectly. So when you unwrap it, the length or the base of this rectangle is the same as the circumference of the circle. So if we just find the circumference of the circle, we will have the base of the rectangle, and then we multiply that by the height of the rectangle, which is the height of the cylinder. So the circumference of the circle is, recall, 2 pi times the radius, or we could take pi times the diameter, but we already know the radius from the area, so we're going to use the radius to find the circumference as well. So this part of the formula right here is the circumference, and then we have the height. So it looks like a complex formula, but really all it boils down to is two circles and a rectangle, and using the measurements on our circles to find those things. So let's look at an example here of a cylinder where our radius is 6 centimeters and the height is 12 centimeters. Those are the only two measurements we need to know on a cylinder to find its surface area. So again, we're going to use our surface area formula, 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h, and the two circles is 2 pi r squared. So the radius is 6, so that's why I put a 6 squared in there. And then again, the radius is 6 and the height is 12. So I just plug those into the formula here. Now, I don't multiply all of this at once because when we multiply by pi, remember we get this big long decimal that never repeats and never terminates. So we're forced to start rounding in this step right here. And the earlier you round, the less accurate your answer is. So I didn't actually multiply by pi yet. But what I did do is I took 6 squared times 2. So the 6 squared is 36. 6 times 6 is 36. Times 2 gives me the 72. So I'm just going to do 72 times pi and just write that down for now. Same thing over here. I did 6 times 12 times 2 and got the 144 times pi. So now I don't have these big long decimals to deal with in this step. I just have to write pi. I'm not writing that out. So when I can add these together, 72 pi plus 144 pi gives me 216 pi. Now in my last step, I can finally take 216 times pi, and then I get this big long decimal as anticipated. And now I can round it. We're going to round to the nearest tenth. So here's the tenths place. Look next door. That's an 8. That's bigger than 5. So this is going to round up to a 6. So the surface area of my cylinder is 678.6 square centimeters. And again, this is still an area, so don't forget to label it like an area, square centimeters on that one, okay? So now let's look at another cylinder here. I don't have all the work shown, but I'm going to start with that formula, 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h. Now I need to know the radius. Be careful with this because the only challenging part about doing these is you have to make sure that you're using the radius in your formula and not the diameter. We never use the diameter when we're doing surface area of a cylinder. So we look at this diagram and we see, we are given this measurement right here, 19 millimeters, that is the diameter. So I need to know the radius. Well, if you'll remember from when we talked about circles, the radius is just half of the diameter. So the radius of this circle is actually 9.5 millimeters. So that's the measurement I'm going to use when I do my calculations here. So now I'm just going to plug in my values. I have 2 pi times 9.5 squared plus 2 pi times 9.5 times the height. Now the height is this distance right here, even though it's laying flat. This is still the height of the cylinder. So if we were to imagine the cylinder standing up on its circle bases, that would be the height of it, 25 millimeters. And now I just need to do my calculations. Now again, I'm not going to use my pi button yet. I'm just going to take 9.5 squared times 2, and 9.5 squared times 2 is 180.5. So I'm just going to do the 180.5 times pi and just write that. I'm not going to multiply by pi yet because that'll give me a big nasty decimal. I just don't want to deal with that right now. And then I'm going to take 9.5 times 25 times 2, and that's 475 times pi. And again, not multiplying by pi yet, just to keep things nice and clean and accurate. And then I'm going to combine these. I've got 180.5 times pi plus 475 times pi. And if I put those together, that's going to be 655.5 times pi. Kind of like combining like terms that we did with our algebraic expressions. These would be considered like terms because they're both multiplied by pi. They're both multiplied by the same letter. And then I can combine those. So my surface area is 655.5 pi. And then now I can multiply by pi. I'm going to use my pi button. 655.5 times pi gives me 2059.313984 dot dot dot. So again, I get a big, long, non-repeating, non-terminating decimal when I'm dealing with pi. I'm going to round to the nearest tenth. That's going to stay a 3. So the surface area of the cylinder is about 2059.3 millimeters squared. And there you have it. So that's the surface area of a cylinder using the formula 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h, and always remembering to use the radius, not the diameter.